Welcome to a One Storyteller, the home of powerful and eye-opening stories that will leave you speechless. Stick around until the very end, because what happens in this story will shock you. Jasmine Carter's hand pressed against her swollen belly as a sharp pain tore through her abdomen. It wasn't the usual discomfort of pregnancy. This was different, stronger, more urgent. She took a deep breath, gripping the kitchen counter. "Chris," she whispered. But her husband, Dr. Christopher Carter, wasn't home. He was in an important board meeting at St. Mary's Hospital, where he worked as the hospital director. Her phone buzzed, and she quickly picked it up. "Melissa," she said weakly, "I need you." Melissa, her best friend, arrived in minutes, worry written all over her face. "We need to get you to the hospital now," Melissa said firmly, grabbing the go bag they had packed weeks ago. The car ride felt like an eternity. Jasmine clenched her fists, breathing through the pain as Melissa sped through traffic. "I'm calling Chris," Melissa said, reaching for her phone. "No," Jasmine gasped. "He's in a big meeting. Let's just get there first." Melissa didn't like it, but she nodded and kept driving. Inside St. Mary's Hospital, the waiting area was packed. Jasmine's body trembled as Melissa helped her to the front desk. A middle-aged nurse with a pinched face, Diane Marshall, barely glanced up. "My friend is pregnant and in pain," Melissa shouted. "She needs to see a doctor right now." Diane sighed as if they were bothering her. "Fill out these forms." Melissa's eyes widened. "She's in serious pain. She needs help now." Diane's eyes flickered to Jasmine before she shrugged. "Pregnancy pain is normal. Take a seat." Jasmine let out a small cry, clutching her stomach. Diane smirked. "Unless she's dying, she can wait." Melissa clenched her fists. "You're going to regret this." The pain worsened. Jasmine's vision blurred. Something was wrong. Melissa stormed back to the desk. "She's getting worse. Get a doctor now." Diane crossed her arms. "I told you there are other patients ahead of her." Melissa's voice rose. "If she was white, would you treat her the same?" Diane's face hardened. "Watch your tone." Jasmine suddenly let out a scream. The entire room fell silent. A young intern, Olivia, rushed over. "Is she okay?" Melissa's hands were shaking. "No, and this nurse doesn't care." Olivia turned to Diane. "Why hasn't she been admitted?" Diane scoffed. "She can wait, like everyone else." Olivia hesitated before whispering, "I'll get help." She ran to the back. Diane smirked. "Some people are just so dramatic." Upstairs, Christopher was finishing his meeting when his phone buzzed. Melissa's panicked voice came through. "Chris, Jasmine is in the ER and they're ignoring her." Christopher's blood ran cold. He didn't even say goodbye to the board members. He sprinted out of the room. By the time he reached the ER, his heart nearly stopped. Jasmine was leaning against the wall, her body weak, pale, trembling. His jaw clenched. "Who's in charge here?" Diane barely glanced up. "Sir, if you're here for the pregnant woman, you need to wait." Christoph's voice was deadly calm. "That pregnant woman is my wife." Diane's face turned pale. Christopher's entire presence changed the energy in the room. Doctors and nurses suddenly snapped into action. Within seconds, Jasmine was on a gurney, surrounded by professionals. Christopher turned to Diane, his voice like steel. "You ignored a patient in distress. You failed your duty as a nurse." Diane stammered. I didn't know." Christopher's eyes burned into hers. "It was your job to know." Hospital security appeared. Christopher gave them a single look. "Escort her out." Diane sputtered. "You can't fire me." Christopher's voice was like ice. "Watch me." Jasmine was rushed into intensive care. Doctors monitored her vitals. Christopher held her hand, his heart pounding. "I'm here, love. I've got you." Jasmine smiled weakly. "You saved me." "The baby is fine. You came just in time." Christopher exhaled sharply, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Jasmine lay in her hospital bed recovering, as Christopher sat beside her, holding her hand. He had barely left her side since she had been admitted. Though her body was still weak, she felt relief knowing that their baby was safe. But outside that hospital room, the entire St. Mary's Hospital was in an uproar. Word of what happened had spread like wildfire. Doctors, nurses, and hospital staff murmured in shock. A nurse had deliberately ignored a pregnant woman in distress, and that woman had turned out to be the hospital director's wife. The board of directors called for an emergency meeting. The hospital's reputation was at stake, and Christopher wasn't going to let this get swept under the rug. In the boardroom, Christopher stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice controlled but filled with authority, "what happened today is unacceptable. A patient, my wife, was left in pain for over an hour because of negligence. And if this happened to her, imagine how many other patients have suffered under Diane's disregard." A murmur spread through the room. Some of the other board members nodded in agreement. Others shifted in their seats, uncomfortable with the reality of the situation. "We have already received complaints about racial discrimination in patient treatment," Christopher continued, his sharp gaze scanning the room. "It ends now." One board member cleared her throat. "Dr. Carter, are you suggesting that this was an act of discrimination?" Christopher's face hardened. "I am suggesting that we investigate all cases of patient neglect in this hospital, because if we allow this kind of behavior to exist here, then we are just as guilty." Silence filled the room. Finally, another board member sighed. "What do you propose?" Christopher's answer was immediate. First, Nurse Diane Marshall is fired immediately. Second, a full review of patient discrimination complaints will be conducted. Third, we will implement mandatory sensitivity training for all hospital staff. We are here to serve the community, not to judge them based on their race, background, or income. There were no objections. Diane Marshall's termination letter was signed within the hour. She had no idea what was coming. Diane sat in the hospital lounge, drinking coffee, completely unaware of the storm headed her way. She had no idea that the entire hospital was talking about her. She had no idea that she had been reported. Diane sat in the hospital lounge, drinking coffee, completely unaware of the storm headed her way. She had no idea that the entire hospital was talking about her. She had no idea that she had been reported. She had no idea that security guards were already walking toward her. When two large men in security uniforms stopped in front of her table, she frowned. "Can I help you?" she asked, looking annoyed. One of the guards crossed his arms. "Diane Marshall, you have been terminated from St. Mary's Hospital effective immediately." Diane's entire body stiffened. "Excuse me." The second guard handed her a termination letter. "Due to negligence, patient endangerment, and failure to uphold hospital policies, your employment has been terminated. You are required to leave the premises immediately." Diane shot up from her chair. "You can't fire me. I've been here for 10 years. The first guard didn't budge. Dr. Carter signed the order himself. Diane's face turned red. "That's because his wife was the patient. This is a personal attack." The second guard's voice was cold. "No, Diane. It's about your failure as a nurse." Diane was furious. "You can't do this. I'll take this to HR. I'll sue the hospital." The guards didn't argue. One of them simply pointed toward the exit. Every eye in the lounge was on Diane. She realized in that moment that she had no support. No one was standing up for her. No one was defending her actions. Because she was wrong. And for the first time, Diane felt something she had never felt before. Fear. Her nursing license was under review. If found guilty of medical negligence, she could be banned from practicing. As she grabbed her things and stormed toward the exit, her head was held lower than it had ever been. She had mopped a pregnant woman in distress. She had thought she had power. But in the end, power means nothing when you abuse it. And now? Diane Marshall was just another disgraced former nurse. This isn't just a story about one nurse. This is a story about what happens when people in power abuse their position. It's a reminder that no matter your status, no matter how untouchable you think you are, justice will find you. Christopher and Jasmine's experience was painful, but it sparked change. Because of them, no patient at St. Mary's Hospital will ever be ignored again. And Diane? She learned the hard way that in the world of medicine there is no room for prejudice. This is a one-storyteller where we bring you real, powerful, and eye-opening stories that need to be told. If this story moved you, don't just click away. Like, share, and subscribe. Because the more we spread these stories, the more we can change the world. Until next time, stay aware, stay strong, and never stop fighting for justice.